I just don't see how anyone with an eating disorder is ever going to heal eating a high carbohydrate diet. I just don't see how it's possible. It is an addictive food. You're perpetuating an addiction. Are there many alcoholics that can have drinks, once a week? I don't think that's a thing.
Hmm.
I see it exactly the same with the sugar addiction. And what's so hard as well is we need to eat. Like food is so, important to our daily life. So how does someone heal from this addiction when they need to eat, but they, can't eat certain foods because it just perpetuates the addiction? Well, my guess would be maybe carnivore or low carbohydrate diets is possibly one of the only answers.
Today I am talking with Frances Gunn, aka Lady and Her Steak. She is a carnivore lifestyle enthusiast. After 9 years of struggling with an eating disorder, she turned to the carnivore diet as a way to heal. And over the past 18 months, her relationship with food has transformed and her body has come back into a balance, including restoring her menstrual cycle. She's now studying with Nutrition Network and stepping into the space to support others on their own journey. She has a really interesting story. Without further ado, here is Frances, Lady on Her Steak. Frances, welcome to the Beyond Binge Eating podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
So happy to be here and thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Can you start with just telling us a little bit about your story? I'm so interested to dig into your experience at the intersection of carnivore and eating disorders,
Mhm.
but just give us like a background, like where you're from,
Mhm.
who you are, sort of like a little backstory into all of this before we get started.
Sure. So I'm from Australia. I'm currently in Brisbane, and my story really starts where I was sent to boarding school at the age of 13. My parents, my family, we lived in Hong Kong at the time. They wanted me to go to school in Australia. And at boarding school, you're fed quite mass produced food, very similar to hospital or prison food,
Wow.
very low nutrients, not much red meat, quite a lot of chicken, low fat, and you don't have your parental supervision as well. So you have access to desserts, snacks, high carbohydrate food, processed food. We had a pantry that had chocolates that you could make to bake things and for cooking, but most of us
Hmm.
would just snack on the chocolate. And in Australia, we have this thing called Milo. It's like a
Oh.
almost like a chocolate drink.
Hmm.
And we would come home from school and have ice cream with Milo on top.
Okay, I think it's kind of
So
like Nesquik, kind of. It's
yeah,
like a
yeah,
hot
sort of like a
chocolate
Nesquik. Yeah,
powder.
it's just
Okay.
basically sugar. And so at boarding school, you're fed breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea. Then you have snacks in the pantry, dinner, dessert, supper. Like I said, you don't have your parents around you, so you can eat as much as you want. So definitely in the early years of boarding school, I that's when my food addiction and my carbohydrate addiction really began.
Hmm.
I was eating a lot of food. I never felt satiated for too long,
Yeah.
and lots of snacking. And over time, obviously, I noticed I was putting on a bit of weight. So that led into restrictive eating behaviors, developing anorexia to cope with my sugar addiction, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
because it was very scary as a young girl having this massive appetite, but not knowing how to handle it and not knowing how to stay slim.
Mm,
So the solution at that time was, well, okay, I just need to eat less and less, even though I'm still starving all of the time, because I
mm-hmm.
had no concept of what eating nutrient dense food was, and
Right.
that by eating more red meat, I would actually feel satiated. So instead, I just, yeah, the foods that I was eating, even in the limited amounts, weren't doing me any favors for helping my sugar addiction. That led into an eating disorder, which I had two hospital admissions for 1 week and one for 1 month. Now, in the hospital, I was fed the feeding tube, the first admission, which is basically just a concoction of sugar and seed oils. During your stay at hospital, you're fed very similar food to boarding school food. So high carb, low red meat,
Yeah.
and you're fed, the 6, 8 times a day. So for someone with essentially a sugar addiction, and I think that's actually how a lot of people with anorexia, they begin with a sugar addiction that they don't know how to
Mm,
handle.
mm.
it's not doing you any favors. It's not helping your mind. It's not helping you feel satiated. It's actually quite terrifying. You're in hospital. You're forced to eat all these foods, but you're still feeling very hungry.
Yeah.
And it's a very conflicting time because you're thinking, how on earth am I ever going to heal myself? How on earth am I ever going to heal my relationship with food when I'm being fed so much now, but I still have this crazy hungry monster inside of me? It's very, very tough. And I feel very, very sad for anyone that goes into a hospital system or even standard eating disorder care where there's no emphasis on what people are actually eating for this disease that is all about food. So I honestly came out of hospital worse off than when I came in. I developed more into binge eating because I would be weighed each week and I felt the pressure to gain weight each week. So what I would do is I would starve the whole week because I still didn't have a healthy relationship with food. And then I would binge right before I was being weighed.
Mm.
And then this developed into a very unhealthy cycle of getting that release from the binge, but then restricting, all of the next week. And I eventually did this to the point where I tricked everyone that I was better, but I had this very, it was actually an eating disorder that was worse than maybe when I was at my smallest,
Yeah.
because the sugar addiction gets worse when you get into these binge eating type habits. So that went on and eventually got worse with adding in alcohol. So I was out of school and then I would starve the whole week, go out and binge on alcohol, go out to bars and clubbing, and then binge the next day, and then just repeat this unhealthy cycle. Definitely adding in alcohol makes things worse for people with these sorts of binge eating behaviors, because even when you're not drunk, the next day, if you're hungover, you still your mind is not quite right and you're in a very, very vulnerable place and you're more likely to binge on foods. So the first step for me to healing some of this was actually quitting alcohol, because I had more control over my mood, more control over the food choices I was making. I read this book by Allan Carr called The Easy Way to Quit Drinking. It's such a great book because most people, they might quit addictions by using their willpower, the willpower method.
Hmm. Hmm.
But anyone that's an addict or has an addiction knows that it's not because you lack willpower that you can't get rid of your addiction. It's other factors. And reading this book, he goes through all of the reasons why drinking is actually stupid and not helpful to your life in any way. And you finish the book and you have no desire to drink again. It's not because you're using willpower, but you've reframed your thinking and your mind and your ability to cope with life and life stresses. So quitting drinking, I started eating more whole foods. I stopped the purging. Sorry, I'm not sure if I mentioned, after hospital, I actually developed, with the binging, I developed purging. I
Hmm.
stopped the purging and I did whole foods for a few years. But I still had this sugar addiction. I still had this hungry, empty pit of a stomach that I tried to handle by eating lots of low calorie, high volume foods, which
Hmm. Hmm.
you see now in the calorie counting epidemic. People are trying to eat, these massive salads and these massive plates of food with the lowest calorie possible. But it's so counterintuitive, isn't it? Because those foods just keep you hungry. So
Hmm.
you might be eating a large volume of lettuce, but you're still starving. You're mentally starving. So I did that for a few years, but I still hadn't healed my period and still hadn't healed my sugar addiction and my hunger signals. And I knew that deep down I wasn't healthy, I wasn't healed, and it really bothered me. It was easy to suppress it for a few years of doing the whole foods, but I look back at that now and realize I really wasn't living life, even at that sort of keeping the sugar addiction tame by eating lots and lots of low calorie
Hmm.
foods.
Hmm.
And I eventually came across carnivore by my parents. my mother, she was doing it to heal some of her menopausal symptoms. And they said to me, this actually might help you heal your hormones. And I had a look into it, and I thought, okay, maybe this could heal my period. But I was also conflicted because you see a lot of information online how women need carbohydrates. They need carbohydrates to support them.
Mm-hmm.
They need
Hmm.
carbohydrates to heal their period. And I thought, oh, maybe this is the worst thing I could possibly be doing. But what do I have to lose? I haven't gotten my period back regularly. It's been about 9 years. And
Wow.
and for me, I've always wanted children, and it's really scared me to think I've done this to myself, and potentially one day I might not be able to have children, and it's no one else's fault but my own. So I gave Carnivore a go, and the I definitely entered into it with the aim of healing my period, and I thought, okay, maybe this will help my hunger signals a bit, but I did not know the extent that it would actually heal my hunger signals and my sugar addiction. It fully healed everything that I was dealing with, and I am so shocked now that I can actually eat a meal and stop when I'm satiated and then feel hunger again, like feeling true hunger again. Because I think when you have this sugar addiction and this binge eating, you're just at this base level of hunger all of the time, but
Hmm.
it's not true hunger. It's like this emotional hunger that you've never fully satisfied your brain and your soul with. But when you go carnivore, you can actually do that because you're eating these purely nutrient dense foods that you can
Hmm.
allow yourself to eat to completion, and you satisfy that soul level hunger.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a bit of my backstory. There's many different rabbit holes, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, all I gotta say is, wow,
Yeah.
that's a story. What a story. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. There are many different rabbit holes there. So I did take a couple notes. One of the things you started off the story is very interesting because you're saying that you had anorexia, right? But that it didn't really come about. You were feeling like, hey, it's not that I had like tons of body image issues or like this excessive need for thinness. It was basically, you said largely just like, man, I have this insatiable hunger. And so how do I deal with this? Is trying to go the other way. But looking back, you feel like it was really just a sugar addiction of like, eating these certain foods that weren't keep you satiated. And so then you try to develop a coping mechanism to combat that. Not only the sugar addiction, you also mentioned you did want to maintain your weight, but it sounded like it wasn't like a whole mental thing. It sounded like it really was just like stemming from your sugar addiction, which is really interesting to hear someone say that because I've read a little bit of articles regarding sugar addiction and anorexia, but I've never talked to anyone who's had that lived experience. So that is really interesting just to start with.
Yeah, I find it super interesting, and I haven't come across many anorexics that speak openly about this and probably speak from a place of actually being healed and can reflect and look back on their journey. But
Right.
I would almost hypothesize that this is a common story for many people that have struggled with anorexia. They first gain a bit of weight, that scares them. They don't know how to deal with that. They realize they also love eating, they also love food, that terrifies
Hmm.
them, but they have a sugar addiction, and then they cope with that sugar addiction by not eating much.
Hmm.
I would guess that it is a common story, but I just don't think that there's many people talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sugar addiction in general is, still not talked about that much. Another
Mm-hmm.
interesting part of the story is you were mentioning that you had two inpatient or residential stays and that you were fed in a way that you like look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like that just fueled everything and made things worse. And by providing you with substances that sort of maintained the addiction or the sugar addiction, right? By being like really substantive, I don't know if that's a word, foods or substances, liquids and, things in feeding tubes. And it just reminded me like I've done two residential stays and the first one was your kind of like more typical like eating disorder place where it's like you are required to eat certain portions of desserts and junk foods and crackers and whatever chips, like ice cream and whatever, like every single day. And I just remember feeling like this didn't really feel helpful. For one of my intentions of going to residential was like to feel safer in my body because I was experiencing suicidal ideations. But beyond that, I was looking to heal, and like I was feeling like not eating junk food was the way for me because I was eating so much junk food. I was binging on all this junk food, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to feel healthy and I want to feel stable and all this sort of thing, and just feeling like that sort of like typical treatment paradigm of like basically requiring people to eat all this dessert and calling that if you can do that, then you are on the right track. Just feels kind of backwards to me. The next residential place I went to was not as strict and it felt a little bit more supportive, but there was still like the sort of thing of like, hey, you need to be eating, these different things. And I just kind of went along with it, but like didn't really feel like my issue is not eating junk food or something, like I don't know, it just
Hmm.
didn't feel right.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to hear your perspective also that what you went through was the actual opposite of what would have been helpful for you.
Yeah, it's a addiction. If anorexia, well, if a lot of anorexics have sugar addictions, why would the standard of care be to fuel those addictions at hospital?
Right.
If
Yeah.
if someone's an alcoholic, we're not going to give them alcohol. We can see that there's no benefit to giving them alcohol and that they should abstain from alcohol. And yeah, it's like honestly putting someone in rehab and giving them alcohol. That's what they're
Right.
doing in hospital.
Yeah.
And what's really unhelpful is I remember back being in hospital and you're given this massive meal of high carbohydrates and like a chocolate shake, and I would finish it all and I would still feel hungry. And I would think, wow, this is the like high calorie meal that they're giving me to make me gain weight, and I'm still hungry. So what
Yeah.
when I and they're telling you that they want you to start eating intuitively. That's the goal. Once you can eat all of this addictive food intuitively, then you're healed. And I am sitting there in complete disbelief thinking, wow, well, this is never going to work. I'm never going to be healed. I'm going to be stuck like this forever. What can I do? I better just continue to starve myself. And it is
Mhm.
the most, yeah, disempowering feeling. And I just don't see how anyone with an eating disorder is ever going to heal eating a high carbohydrate diet. I just don't see how it's possible. It is an addictive food. You're perpetuating an addiction. Are there many alcoholics that can have drinks, once a week? I don't think that's a thing. It's
Hmm.
I see it exactly the same with the sugar addiction. And what's so hard as well is we need to eat. Like food is so, important to our daily life. So how does someone heal from this addiction when they need to eat, but they, can't eat certain foods because it just perpetuates the addiction? Well, my guess would be maybe carnivore or low carbohydrate diets is possibly one of the only answers.
Right. It is a tough thing, and yeah, for people who have addictive patterns with food, then it can be, and I mean it's been in my experience, that simplifying things and just focusing on whole, unprocessed, low carbohydrate diet has been really helpful for me. So that's definitely been my experience. I'm curious for you. I mean, it just sounds kind of like a godsend that you weren't even looking for the carnivore diet, that you were just had been suffering for many, many years, and it's just kind of continuing, and you're just kind of, just continuing with your life, even though things weren't great, and then luck would have it, or destiny, or whatever you want to call it, then your mom introduced you to the carnivore diet, and then it seems like it's really worked out for you. How long did it take for you to experience the benefits? And I'm curious, when you started it at first, did it look a certain way, like a certain version, and now you've settled into a different rhythm? I'm just wondering sort of how this journey happened ever since you started carnivore.
Honestly, within a week of doing carnivore, my hunger signals quiet down. I really told myself because I did my research before, and I knew it was a way of eating that you shouldn't be tracking, you shouldn't be counting, you should let your body eat as much as it wants. And then, things will eventually settle out. So in the first week, I was definitely focusing on eating enough fat because that's the nutrient that is going to satiate me. So I was making sure I was eating enough fat, and I actually felt like my hunger signals were already healing in the first week. I couldn't eat an endless amount of food. Whereas if I had started eating, like a carbohydrate diet, I would have been able to eat like forever and ever and ever. So honestly, in the first week, things were healing. And by 3 months, I felt like I had fully healed my relationship with food. But then I would say maybe in the last year, I've been able to eat need less and less food, not on
Mm.
purpose, just
Hmm.
by my body naturally needing less and less. I definitely think in the first few months, my body was playing catch up on the nutrients that it was asking for because it had, it had been deprived for so many years. When I was actually in hospital, I got a DEXA scan of my bone density, and I didn't have very good bone density. So I'd
Mm.
clearly already done damage on my body and my health by eating the way that I was eating. So who knows? I hadn't done a scan in many, many years, but I'm sure it would have decreased as well because I wasn't eating enough nutrients um,
Hmm.
over the years after that as well. So my body definitely needed food and animal based foods to heal, and probably still does. I probably am still healing. Within a year, I was actually able to start eating less and less foods and feeling, that hunger that I needed to be eating all the time. Because when I first started carnivore, I was eating 3 meals a day and quite large meals. I had a very, very big appetite, but I was not restricting. I was letting myself eat those large meals. And then in probably by like a year and a half, only recently, I've been eating 2 meals a day very comfortably, not thinking about food, not feeling like I'm craving foods. And, but also intuitively, like if I want a snack or, feel like something extra, I let myself do
Hmm.
that. Whereas before, I was very much regimented on how many meals a day I was allowed to
Yeah.
eat and what times I was eating, and I would drink a lot of water with each meal to make me feel more full. And now
Yeah.
I've actually found it's more helpful not to drink water when you're eating because you actually let your digestive juices like do their thing without flooding
Mm-hmm.
it with water.
Yeah.
So I found that's actually been helping my digestion quite a bit. But
So
yeah, that's the recent sort of trend that's been
great.
happening.
And so what are the type of foods that you eat? Yeah, like what's kind of the things that you eat on repeat? Like do you add
Mm-hmm.
extra fat or do you just eat a steak and that's it? Like what are the type of foods that feel like really nourishing for
Mm-hmm.
you right now?
I sort of gauge at how fatty the meat looks. If there isn't enough fat, I will add more tallow usually instead of butter. I find tallow to be more satiating than butter. And I typically will have some patties, some minced patties, or a steak. And I might have a 300-gram steak and 300 in the morning, and 300 grams of minced patties in the evening. And yeah, just depending on how fatty the steak is, I might add butter or
Hmm.
cook it with tallow and maybe
Hmm.
an egg. I prefer the egg yolks over
Hmm.
the egg white. So
Hmm.
it's funny, a lot of the gym people that are into the calorie counting and scared of fat, they just want the egg whites, but it's the
Right.
egg yolks that have the fat and the best nutrition, and they're also the yummiest part.
Definitely. Yeah, I've been eating a lot more yolks lately, and I'm curious, what do you do with the whites? You just toss it?
I'm sad to
Okay.
say that I just throw it away.
Yeah, I've been trying to ponder what to do with the whites. And so I came across this Instagram post as I was stalking you, and it was like how it was from March 23rd,
Mhm.
2026, how carnivore and animal-based diets can heal EDs. And it says a whole bunch of topics. Do you want me to refresh your memory or are you know?
Sure, refresh my
It's
memory
yeah,
because
it says
I wouldn't
stuff
know it off the
like
top of my head.
yeah, it can your body doesn't have to rely on sugar. It can switch to fat for fuel, creating ketones, a more stable energy source, so clearer thinking. less cravings and binge cycles, provides highly absorbable nutrients, helps correct common deficiencies in eating disorders, activates autophagy, improving mitochondrial function, which is usually damaged by eating disorders. I'm like, there's much more information in this, but I'm just kind of
Yes.
summarizing the main points. Avoiding ultra-processed foods and refined carbs can help reduce cravings. And also reduce decision fatigue, supports key brain chemicals, helping you feel calmer, more stable, more mood stability, and it supports a healthier gut, less bloating, reduced inflammation, and reduces brain inflammation and oxidative stress, and also supports BDNF. So there's a lot of really potent and compelling points there. I was wondering if there's anything that you want to expand upon or just comment more on.
One thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is the difference between a keto diet and a carnivore diet for healing someone with a sugar addiction or eating disorders. And I think I touch on that in the post. It's this decision fatigue thing. And I think the problem with maybe a keto diet, and you know, maybe it works for people, and that's great, not to discredit that. But someone that has a sugar addiction or an eating disorder, they will think of all the ways in whatever they're allowed to eat that they can, I don't know, create it into this thing that they use as a crutch or a coping mechanism or something that's interesting, or using food as entertainment. For example, if you're keto, you can make all of these keto desserts that, you know, you can use these like sweeteners and things like that. And you can make sorts of like different breads. Basically, with keto, you can actually probably recreate any dish with the keto ingredients. And the problem with that, with someone that maybe has an addiction or is fanatical with food, is then you just start, you know, focusing on that and trying to do all these desserts and create all these things, and override your hunger signals because you find this entertaining, and you kind of become a bit more obsessed with that, and you're putting all your eggs into that basket now. And what's good with the carnivore diet is there's no decision fatigue because there's not many decisions to make. You literally have a very small amount of foods you can choose from, and you don't really feel like getting creative because a steak tastes delicious, it's satiating, it's got all the nutrients that you need. So you can just fall in a pattern of really treating food as a fuel source and not as entertainment, not as an emotional coping mechanism. It is just the nutrients you need to live, like putting fuel into a car. And that's why I think it's so incredible for people with eating disorders or sugar addictions, because there's just that separation of using food as an emotional resource, and it just becomes a fuel source.
That's really interesting. So for you, it's been really helpful to have that sort of clear demarcation.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, the foods that you have available are like this much, and you're like, and these are the ones that are really nourishing and then are going to decrease my cravings.
Yes.
And just makes it easy.
Yeah, because I actually did do keto, but even with keto, I would like start snacking on, you know, low carbohydrate vegetables, but
Hmm.
I still had like unhealthy tendencies with those
Hmm.
vegetables. Like I would eat a lot
Hmm.
of carrots, so much
Hmm.
so that my hands were turning orange.
Wow.
And yeah, with anyone that has those sort of like obsessive compulsions,
Yeah.
keto can be a bit of a gray area still, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on what type of keto, because it's like there's so
Yeah.
many definitions of keto. And for you, so you said that you had tried keto before carnivore, and since starting carnivore, have you sort of like I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say, yeah, like have you had experiments of like carbohydrates or things that are not carnivore? And I'm curious, if you have, what was the impact of it? Like, did you
Mhm.
have more cravings and, or has it just been carnivore all the way?
So only one time have I really had like a full non-carnivore meal, and it was when I was on a plane and I was hungry, and you know,
Hmm.
I just thought I'm going to eat it, and
Yeah.
I was fine. I didn't, you know, go back into being, oh, I need carbs now, and I've
Hmm.
undone all of the good work. I just went back to eating carnivore the next day, but I, yeah, probably didn't feel the best the next day.
Hmm.
I have
Hmm.
noticed though, I'm very sensitive to other foods now. Like if I go to a restaurant and get a steak, I can usually tell if it's been cooked in a weird oil, like a seed
Hmm.
oil or a vegetable
Hmm.
oil.
Hmm.
And I definitely don't feel my best. I don't know if that's a good thing because now I'm sensitive to all of the other foods that are not carnivore, but
Hmm.
I'm definitely a lot more in tune with my body. Whereas before, when I was, not carnivore, not keto, not anything, I would put so many different sorts of foods into my body and have no
Hmm.
connection with my stomach and what was going on. I'd eat these horrible artificial sweeteners and weird low calorie snacks that you could buy. And I don't think it's good for your body. And also, I don't think it's good to be so disconnected that you feel no difference when you sort of feed yourself those foods. But now I
Hmm.
definitely do. I think in the future, I have healed my hunger signals so much that I wouldn't be worried if I was out and about and, with friends and had a pizza or something happened. I think I'm healed to the point where it wouldn't derail all of the work that I've done and that I would go right back there. But I have no desire now or probably in future to start eating heaps of carbohydrates again when I know how good I feel on a very low carb, high protein, animal based diet.
Yeah. And that's just so wonderful that you've done the experiment for yourself because you did so many years doing more of the ultra processed food and higher carbohydrate diet, and you know how that feels in your body, and then immersing yourself in the carnivore diet and just feeling like, hey, this is actually feeling better for me.
Yeah.
I love what you were saying, like, hey, I think if I ever were to have a pizza or whatever, it's gonna be fine. I'll just go back to carnivore. That just sounds like a lot of wisdom right there of like, I don't need to freak out about what I'm eating, but I know in my bones that this is what is feeling good for me. And so then you can make that decision. And I'm assuming if anything ever changes, you can change your decision too, but based on your own experience.
Yeah. And I think that's important, to always keep an open mind, especially with any sort of diets. We're always learning new information about ourselves and nutrition. And a lot of people come from a place of they know everything and they know what's right for everyone else. And we're all learning all of the time. And,
Right.
there's heaps of long-term carnivores that change their mind and they start eating something else, or,
Yeah.
even like vegans that become carnivore.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, we all need to stay humble. We all need to keep an open mind. We all have different journeys, different places where we're at. And am definitely open to that and open to any change in future. But right now, I'm feeling good in what I'm doing. And back to what I was saying about keto, I definitely think it's possible that people that want to heal their eating disorder, they do carnivore, but maybe after carnivore and they want more variety in their life, they can go do keto and be perfectly fine as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
I'm someone that food wasn't a massive part of my family and our culture. And so it's a much easier thing for me to just be very utilitarian and eat my meat and not have much variety. But for someone that's, I don't know, maybe from a Greek background or an Italian
Hmm.
background, and
Hmm.
food is so central to how they show love and family, it would be very hard to be carnivore when you're constantly
Hmm.
surrounded by these family gatherings and
Hmm.
foods that you can't eat. So they're in a completely different situation to me where it's much easier for me to be utilitarian about it. So I think that, there are other options for those people to maybe try being more keto if that's what they want to do.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I'm definitely not saying that that's not going to work. I think everyone's different and with what they want and what their goals are. And there's many different possibilities. It's not just you have to be carnivore for the rest of your life.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. With your journey with alcohol, you said that you used the Allan Carr method to quit alcohol and that it ended up being surprisingly easy for you. I wonder if there's any similar, is there anything that you drew upon from that method in your carnivore? Do you like it? To me, it seems like there might be some similarities in your drink, like how you quit drinking and also how you quit sugar. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
wondering what your perspective is on that.
At the same time of the Allan Carr book, I came across this holistic psychiatrist called Kelly Brogan,
Hmm.
and she very much has the stance that all of our mental illness and things that we go through, we have so much responsibility to change it and to heal ourselves. And it's actually up to us to get better. And this was in very stark contrast to what I was taught, in a hospital and with all my providers, that I had this random brain disease. There's nothing I can do about it. I've got no responsibility. I'm a victim. We'll just give you some medication and send you on your way. And that is not a very empowering thing to hear. But hearing Kelly Brogan and this lady who's her practice is getting people off anti-psychiatric medications and helping them with their various mental illnesses. Hearing her say, no, it is actually possible to heal. It is possible to get off all your medications,
Hmm.
and you have the power to do it. So hearing her at the same time of reading this Allan Carr book made me realize it's actually everything I'm doing in my life is in my control. I can do anything that I set my mind to. There's a lot of a victim mentality in our society, and people that, okay, I have a problem with drinking, I'm a victim of this, like it's not my fault. Reframing that and realizing, no, it's actually you are in control of your patterns and your behaviors, and you are the only person that can really get yourself out of the miserable mental space that you're in. No one else is going to do it for you. So I think I very much carried that mentality with quitting drinking and healing my relationship with food. And I'm very much an all-in person. Once I set my mind to doing something, I'm going to do it. And there's no, room for, oh, no, like, let's just be a victim in this and let's just stay in
Hmm.
this, area of comfortability. Because once you see something for the way it is, I really find it hard to see it in a different way.
Hmm. Interesting. I love that. And yeah, I do believe that there's a lot of elements of taking matters into our own hands and feeling our own power instead of, being like, I can't do anything about it. And that's one of the issues I have with 12 step. I mean, I think it's kind of, people can look
Mm-hmm.
at it in different ways, but the thing of like I don't have any power, even though I know people in 12 step say hey, you can look at it a different way. I don't know. I love the idea of thinking that I'm capable of making a change, and
Yeah.
doing what is possible to facilitate that change.
Yeah. Because who else is going to do it? And
Yeah.
then if you're not going to be the one to do it, then no one else will do it. And then
Mhm.
what's next then? Nothing. You just stay where you are. There's literally no other option.
And I see on your Instagram that you have a whole bunch of approaches to your day and to holistic health that you implement. So it's not just eating steak that that helps you to feel good. There's a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I saw was that you have a super early bedtime. Is that true?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so what time do you go to bed usually?
Probably 8 p.m.
Okay. So tell me, I love that. And also tell
Yeah.
me how does that work? I mean, are you you just shut down all the lights like
Yeah.
and
So yeah, I try to read before bed. Like I have red lights rather than blue lights, and get off my phone. But the reason I have an early bedtime is I realized I am my most productive and I most enjoy life earlier in the day.
Mhm.
And by the time the sun sets, I've had dinner. I do nothing productive after dinner time. It's usually watching TV or being on
Mhm.
my phone. So for me, it just works better to cut off that time and go to sleep earlier, and
Mhm.
then wake up earlier and really make the most of my morning, especially before I've actually recently just stopped working full time. But before, when I was working full time, it is one of my most favorite practices of self-care is having a morning to yourself, especially
Mhm.
before you're about to start a busy work day, working and maybe not doing something that's completely aligned in your passions. So for me, that was a big thing. I'd go to the gym. I would have coffee with all of my friends after the gym, sitting around chatting, and then maybe
Oh.
go for a walk and have this complete whole morning for myself, and then go to work. So yeah, that's
Mhm.
that's why I go to sleep early.
Wonderful. And do you have like a few other things that you want to share as far as holistic factors that you
Mm-hmm.
implement in your day besides having a morning to yourself and
Yeah. I think having clean water is really, really important. I think a lot of us are drinking dead tap water with fluoride in it that is not satiating. I think this also ties into eating, because I think a lot of the times people are just thirsty and they end up eating. And you can be thirsty and drink really nutrient deficient, mineral deficient water. And so if you feel that you are chronically dehydrated, which I think a lot of us are, the best thing you could do is go buy some spring water from somewhere and load up on spring water, which will have all of the minerals that you need. And getting a clean electrolyte, especially if someone goes carnivore, electrolytes are really important, but probably a lot of us are depleted in electrolytes. So yeah, it's that, I think that's really important as well. Also, just having a look at the products you're using, what you're putting on your body, what you're putting on your face, because all of these things will either, they'll add to your health or detract from your health. If you're soaking in toxic products, you're eventually going to have to detox that, which takes a toll on your body and your vitality and how you're feeling, which in turn all leads back to how you're eating and your relationship with food and your energy levels throughout the day. I think as well, being very mindful of how you spend your time and who you spend your time with. I'm really getting out of my early young phase of being a people pleaser, and I'm very specific on who I surround myself with and the positivity that I want to bring into my life. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think it's, if you are creating a good circle around you, you're going to attract good people around you. And at the same time, people that might feel like they're, not bringing that sort of energy in will work on themselves as well to bring that sort of positive energy in. I also, a big thing I'm working on is my social media use. There is such a balance to work on when you have social media. I actually only got my social media in November of last year after not having social media for 5 years. And I had such a great time not having social media. And for so long, I didn't want to get it. But I also knew I felt very passionate about the carnivore diet. And I potentially saw myself as being a health coach one day. And with the way the world is now, you sort of have to market yourself on social media. Otherwise, no one will ever find you. So I built up the courage. I made my social media account. And it's been great. Lots of opportunities have come from that. But at the same time, I really miss how my attention span before was completely undivided. And I definitely was a lot more present. So my new focus now on is finding that balance, because you can easily lose yourself in social media. And that, I think, is probably going to be one of the biggest issues in the next, however many years, especially with young people. And that's a new addiction. That's a new crutch that people are turning to. That's exactly the same with food, alcohol, drugs, and it's made to be as addictive as possible. So yeah, those are my few things.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree about, phone addictions and social media use being very addictive. And it can be a double-edged sword for sure. I experienced that myself, but I'm glad it gave us the opportunity to connect.
I
And
know.
yeah,
Such positives from it that
right,
it's one of those things you have to work on living in the balance. I find
right.
it a lot easier, and maybe other people with addictions find this easier, but I find it a lot easier to just not do something at all. But then, you don't get the benefits of that, and you're also not training yourself to be able to stay in the balance of something and, learn to live in harmony with something. But yeah, it's definitely challenging.
So if someone is struggling with sugar addiction, where would you tell them to start? Like, yeah, what would you say?
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, sugar addiction, you need to eat first of all, but eating sugar is just going to perpetuate your sugar addiction. Perhaps if someone's eating a standard American diet, going straight from that to carnivore will probably not be helpful and could be very scary and damaging, because that would be a lot of stress on the body. But I would suggest, if you have a sugar addiction, trying a low carbohydrate keto diet for a few months. And then if you feel you still have that sugar addiction, then trying carnivore diet for at least 3 months, I would say. But yeah, it's very much food related. I don't think you're going to cure the sugar addiction by still eating lots of sugar. I don't know of many people that have been able to do that. So you need to look at what you're eating, and you need to, realize that it's up to you to heal the sugar addiction. And it's going to take a lot. It's going to be challenging mentally, but it does, once you can actually set your mind to it and decide to do it, it actually gets easier and easier after that. It's probably the hardest part is probably committing to it and
Mhm.
starting it. And once you've started, it actually gets easier and easier.
Thank you so much for being here, Frances. I really appreciated hearing your unique story. Is there anywhere that you want to send anyone who might be watching on YouTube or listening on some audio platform, any links that you want to share?
Yeah, I would just say the only place you can really find me is Instagram, and it's at Lady and Her Steak. I also have TikTok, but I mainly operate from Instagram. So if anyone wants to connect, I would be more than happy to.
Thank you so much, Frances. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to chat with you.